Good evening. I'm John Bailey. This is People to be Heard, the program where people who have something to say have their say. And I'm joined with Jim Benerofe on People to be Heard. And tonight you've got Richard Cirulli, White Plains resident and author of the Songs of Roland. And we are here to talk about his book and its relevance to contemporary events and contemporary behavior. And thank you for coming on in to talk about the book. And
Thank you.
Mr. Cirulli is a resident of White Plains. He has taught at the graduate and undergraduate level, and he even taught college courses in the prisons. Some of the colleges he taught at were Marist, St. Thomas Aquinas, Mercy, and Westchester County College. Community College, right. And he also has a number of PhDs. And yes, right. And he has published 12 books of poetry and what was the other subject?
Poetry and metaphysics.
That's right. So what prompted you to write this book?
First of all, it was always on my wish list to write a book. That was something I always wanted to do. And it also came at an interesting time of my life. I was approaching my 65th birthday, and I was just, ending a 10-year relationship. So these, they were a bit of a catalyst to get you going and to write it. So there was a lot of influences going on around my life, and I said, it's now time to do it. And I just started writing it, and it actually started out as a play. And as I got into about the second or third chapter, I said, it won't work as a play because most of it occurs inside this Roland's head. He's very spiritual, he's very existential, and it won't work as a play. This is something you have to read. So as I started, going through the book, I then put the main character as he goes through life, as deals with life's frailties or human condition. I place them in the context of the world itself.
Yeah, so the modern world.
The modern world.
And you use Westchester places in the narrative, Cold Spring, Fishkill, and we can all relate
to it. Yes. Former territories of mine.
Yes, former
many memories, yes.
Right.
Now, actually, who is Roland? What does he do in life, so to speak?
Well, Roland's a very existential, very cerebral person. He's just got out of a marriage, and because he finds that his wife was cheating on him, there's infidelity. And he's a very moral person, and he's trying to understand life, and he's trying to pull things together. A very intellectual person. He's a college professor, and he's also an artist. He, in the local community, he's well respected in that field, and he's trying to navigate life. He also, it says in the synopsis, but he has a secret that he's dying of an incurable illness. So he's wrestling with how to make peace with his life, a very spiritual person, and his spirituality, the depth of it isn't revealed till much later in the book, and he hides it for specific reasons.
Well, as I was reading your book, I was struck by the propensity throughout history that the violent nature of solving conflict has been dominant in human nature, and this comes through in his mental flashbacks to a life he has in the past.
Oh, exactly. The book was taken, the theme is from the old medieval classic, The Song of Roland, which was a moral tale, and that, as a child growing up, I had a big influence on me. So, and how do you take this and project it into the modern world? The book, the historical fact is it goes back to medieval France in the 13th century. And what happened was there was a group of peace-loving Christians called the Cathars, and they gained a lot of converts in southern France. That was actually under the crown of Spain. And the Pope was very upset about this, and he didn't want this. They felt that this was a threat. And he threatened the local lords in southern France, if you don't get rid of these heretics, we're going to come after you. And the local lord said, you can't tell us what to do. And besides, my wife converted and my children did. These are peace-loving people. And long story short was they launched a crusade, and the first town they hit was in southern France, was called Béziers. And in one day, the Crusades actually slaughtered 20,000 men, women, and children. They were butchered. They were, some of them were burnt alive at the stake. They took women and children, raped them, took their clothes off, used them as target practice.
Right.
And one of the
Like the Armenian genocide in the 20th century.
Nothing changes.
Nothing changes.
The one of the officers went to the Baron who was leading the this crusade. The King of France didn't do it, and he has a reputation for being very bloodthirsty. And he went to the Pope's legate and he said, you know, there's some Catholics mixed up with those people too. You know, how do we know the Catholics from the Cathars? And the Pope's legate said, kill them all. God will know his own people.
Yes, I thought some of those quotes that you take from history are chilling.
Yeah,
for coming from religious persons.
From a religious person,
yes.
yeah. And you know, to make it very clear to the reader, I was raised a Catholic. I have nothing against the Catholic faith at all. I think it just shows that when you have people in power and what an institution can do, and how people follow blindly. And this crusade went on for a couple of 100 years, and the Inquisition was started specifically to rid France and and northern Italy of this peace-loving people. You know, God forbid you have peace-loving people on the earth. You know,
well, the Crusades were a treasure-seeking venture.
Yes.
Cloaked in a religious mission.
Sure, everyone
was about booty.
Yeah, exactly. And at the siege of Béziers, what they did is that was so nasty. There's what they call the ribald, or the camp followers, and they usually have clubs and daggers, and they usually used to function as cannon fodder for the knights or the army. And what this fellow Montfort, who was the Baron, said, we'll increase the booty and we'll put you in first. And these were very undisciplined people. And if you read the account of what actually happened, it's chilling.
Very graphic, and it's
sad.
It's shocking because there is very little written about the details of what happened in a lot of these crusade battles.
Well, that's it. You know, you just see it. You know, castle sacked and decays. But if you put a face on those victims, it really, that's when it really starts, you know, when you look at this and say, this is repeated every day, you know, and, you know, even today, you know, we hear things like, you know, in a bombing raid, you know, bombing strike, you know.
Collateral damage.
Collateral damage, is as if it's okay. I don't know if I would go up to the parent as they're burying your child and just say, well, you know, it's collateral damage. I'm not sure that's going to make them feel better. But the point of the book is nothing has really changed after all these years. And Roland was constantly questioning this moral quest and always wondering, you know, the higher order of things. And it put him in conflict with the secular world because he had this higher ideal to follow. And people that knew him said he's brilliant.
Yes.
Yeah. Go ahead.
And what I take from the book is the character relates his crusade in the contemporary world to live a moral life and avoid temptation and various other distractions.
Exactly.
Which he feels are the product of the very loose interpretation of moral codes today.
Exactly. He's in a position where he could have more than what he has. He knows he has the intellect, he knows he could have those talents, but he doesn't. There's a lot of restraint. So people that are close to him hold him in high regard. His detractors or as people like Roland, who's a little bit advanced spiritual.
He has to resist temptation too in the book.
Oh, quite a bit, yes.
And what I found fascinating about the style in the book, it reminded me very much of the Socratic dialogues of Plato in Plato's Republic. Yes. It's the same type of, rather, if you consider that reasoning and argument can be riveting, then you will like this book because, well, it is riveting. I mean,
it is. Yes, it is.
I mean, people are not exposed to it too much. and they don't like reading much anymore. But if you like reading,
yeah, it's a deep read.
Yes.
It's not for the faint-hearted. It's someone who, when I actually put the book together, we started doing these focus groups. I said the audience is going to be people who have a conscience and a sense that there's something better than themselves, and that there's a higher order of things, you know. And if we look at society today, I just want to quote, and I'm actually quoting from David Brooks, and he said back in the late 50s, early 60s, they asked high school students, how many of you think you're exceptional? And the response was like 8%. They asked people today, and it was like 80%. So this book is not for the superficial thinker, it's a superficial person who views life in that sense. You know, it's like I'm the center of the universe. Roland makes it very clear there's a higher order that has to be followed, and he's willing to take the slings and arrows for it. Well respected in his own group, his detractors feel he's a fool. You know, how could he pass up this opportunity?
Did you try going to any major publishers with the book?
Actually, what I did is I wrote the book, and I said, what do I do next? And of course, I did a little bit of research, and you talk to people, and you hear, well, I went to 150 publishers, I got turned down. And I said, well, that doesn't sound good. So I called a friend up who had a few books published and said, just call this fellow Paul. And I called, and within 3 weeks, the deal was set. So I was pleasantly surprised. You know, I was expecting a little bit of a battle, not a battle, a little bit of a fight. So I can't have a woe story for you to say I was, you know, turned down 150 times. So.
How long did it take you to write the book?
Actually, 2 weekends.
2 weekends?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
Well, it would seem to me that it flowed as if it was written in white heat, and so I'm glad to hear that, because it moved along, and you could see there was a sense that he was racing against time, but you didn't know why. He was racing against his own demons, and whether or not going back in time to an old flame who wants to see him again, he had to wrestle with that, and he was very upset about his moral relationship in that relationship, and he was tempted by several other females who, in the best Socratic tradition, reasoned and pointed out, well, that's a flaw in your reasoning.
Yeah, exactly.
That you don't want me, you know. I wish I could meet women like that. Yeah. There's a flaw in your reasoning that you don't want me, right?
And you know, and it's odd because that's that paradox. When people see that, they, it's very interesting. If you were to have that dialogue with people in private, the general consensus would be, "Oh, just do it. What's the problem?"
That's exactly.
And Roland's saying no. There is a higher standard, and as the book was being done, it just came to me. I couldn't put it down. There's a stream of consciousness, and I worked around the clock. I mean, it was just, you know, nonstop.
Yes, the only way to really write a story is as soon as it is in your mind, or you heard it covered, and you just blast it out.
Yes.
You know, and that's the way a good advertising piece of copy is written.
Do you write anything out in longhand, or do you just use a computer?
A good part of the book was written in longhand.
Really? That's old school.
Yeah, and what will happen is the few times I have to actually do things like go to pick up my dry cleaning. You know, you're always carrying a pad with you, and that thought hits you. You know, you're scribbling it down. So.
Now that's what they always tell you should do, but of course I never do it.
Yeah, it's well, people that know me, they know I always have a pad. I'm writing something down, or usually talking to myself. So.
Yeah. Now, do you view these orders of the past that you talk about in the book, Gnosticism, Kabbalah, Freemasonry manifestations, as self-serving or self-quests, sharing enlightenment of the individual?
Yeah, well, it's never intended to be self-serving.
No, but it serves the self.
It serves the self well.
That's probably what I should have said.
Yeah, because what it basically does is when you enter that, as we say, the arduous path, you realize that if you're going to, as they say, mark your day well before God and man, you've taken on a pretty big oath. That means when you're at work and the boss says, you know, we're going to give you a big bonus, all you have to do is throw a coworker under the bus. Mm-hmm. And you have to weigh between, you know, a very lucrative deal.
It's the White House.
Yeah, that's how you get there. Exactly. And so these orders basically teach you to take life in a more, that you have to serve humanity, that there's something beyond yourself, and your accomplishments and your interactions with people should always bring out in those people to reach a higher self amongst themselves as well. It's a very giving, and it's a very disciplined practice. Mm-hmm. You can't really grasp it in one lifetime, right. as Roland found out.
You have a PhD in, let's see, what does it say on the back there? You have a PhD in Sacred Science from the International College of Esoteric Studies. Yeah. So this is not to be taken lightly. I felt that the book is very everyday living.
Yes.
And dealing with the kind of challenges we face every day, the
yes.
moral challenges, and that there's no violence in it except for Roland's mental or dream flashback
yes.
to the Crusades.
Yes.
Now, did you intend that to mean that was another life of his, or was it simply?
Yeah, well,
like
the morals,
a reincarnation in the present?
Exactly, because with the one of the morals presented is that Roland is thrown back, he's reincarnated, and at the time of the siege in France, and he's taken an oath of peace, and he's supposed to marry his wife later that day, you know, and so he's taken his oath of peace. And as this is going on, and this battle erupts, he sees someone raping his wife to be.
Yeah.
and the wife is saying, "Don't intercede. You have to go for the higher thing. You know, this is an illusion. It's only the flesh. Mm-hmm. Don't resort to violence. It's going to hurt your soul in the long term." And now he's confronted again, but he can't watch this happen. Yes. So he pulls out the sword and he starts defending his wife's honor. Yes. So it puts people in a paradox as, if you're going to follow the laws, what laws are you going to hold? And
well, in any creeds, and yeah. So in today we are faced with these kind of decisions all the time.
Exactly.
We're not asked to take up a sword or something.
Exactly.
But we have to do that. So this book does explore this mental thing. Now, you ran for Common Council in White Plains in 2011.
Yes, I did.
Completely switching gears on the Republican ticket with Mr. Who were your other running mates there? Terrence Guerriere and
Michael Donnelly.
Yeah.
And Jim Arndt.
Right, and that was about the last time there was a Republican ticket for all the seats.
Yes, that's correct.
In the council. What do you feel about leadership today?
I'm very neutral on it. I won't make...
what does it take to be a leader today?
Today? Well, it's a lot, more so today than in the past. I think we deal with more complex problems. There's a lot that's going on. As you know, the country is very divided on many issues. One of the things the country lacks today is discourse. You don't see people coming together. It's I'm right because I belong to this and you're wrong, and we don't seem to look for a common ground. There's this elitism, so we've lost all sense of discourse, and I don't think this is going to be good for the country. I think this will, and that actually is brought out in the latter chapters of Roland as to,
yes, in the epilogue.
Yes,
which was this a future vision, or was this a way to?
Well, it's I would say a little
purpose
both.
Of that epilogue?
It's a little bit of both, and we just haven't learned to live together on this planet as human beings. I mean, you know, we are a humanity in distress. We're a frail lot, you know, and our technology advances, you know, exponentially every day, but our emotional intelligence and our psychological anthropology is actually declining. So you're putting some very powerful tools into beings that are not very human, and basically in the hands of children. And it doesn't read for a good future, We just don't see it. Look at the papers today. Every time there's any type of debate, it's always attack, attack, attack. You'll never see people like in the past say, well, let's take this issue. Let's get a panel. Let's look at it from both sides. Nothing is absolute. And you just don't see that. I mean, I quit teaching economics. I mean, my first PhD was in business and economics. And I just had to walk out. There was just this sense that, no, this is the program. And I just can't do it.
We touched on religion in the past. What do you think of the church today? Do you feel organized religion has become increasingly political, has descended into the Middle Age version of the power church?
Yeah, I actually think, regretfully, they're becoming politicized because of loss of power. Mm-hmm. I mean, if you go to your house of worship, I would think you go there just out of respect for your Creator, and that's it. You go there and look at me, look what I failed to do, my sins of omission, and what could I do to be a better person. But if you're using that institution to throw stones at someone else and use it for political gain, I would probably say it's lost its purpose. So I see, people are just trying to bring more members in. People are getting a little tired of organized religion, and so they're trying to appease to different political groups to fill their roles. And I think any person who follows, very esoteric teachings, we can't put lips on the Almighty's tongue. We can't say, well, we believe because God said this is right. Well, He hasn't spoken to me personally, so I don't know, and we don't know. So I would say that we've actually lost that sense of spiritualism. We politicized it.
Yeah. Speaking of spiritualism, I had an experience where I was experiencing sciatica pain, rather bad pain while I was on vacation, and I happened to walk into the church, the Cathedral of Orvieto in Italy, which houses the altar cloth that figured in the Corpus Christi miracle, where the host, the bread of communion, turned into blood. And it's black spotted and all that. And I walked out of the church, and the sciatica pain was gone. So I immediately mentioned it to my wife. And I was wondering, you had mentioned there was an experience you had when you were young that led you onto this path. Do you want to talk about that?
I was a very young child, and it's probably not a very popular subject today. We don't like to, it doesn't get you far if you speak of things of a more loftier realm. But at a very, very young age, I would say I had some very moving spiritual, mystical experiences that pretty much put me on my path.
Your head.
What's that?
It hits you in the head.
It was, I guess, an epiphany moment, you know, and ever since I was a young child, I just saw things in a very different light, and you started looking at what we call popular culture and scratching your head and saying, there's something really wrong with this.
Started the examining of life.
Yeah. We just don't dig in very deeply within ourselves, Do
you think you'll write more books?
Oh, of course, yeah. That'll keep me out of trouble. But I actually have a next book coming out. It will be early next year. It's actually completed. It's just a matter of putting it in order. It's called Love Sutras, and I keep a diary.
Love Seekers.
What's that?
Seekers.
Sutras.
Yeah.
Love Sutras, love songs. Yeah. And I keep a diary, and I had poems written to former lovers and things like that over the years that were very personal, and it goes through the ups and downs and everything else, and so I put them together in a compilation, and I'm going to have that published. And I think people could relate. I mean, these are things that anyone who's ever been in a relationship, good and bad, has experienced this. They may not articulate it or put it in writing, but the emotions are there. And I think people could relate to that and say, yeah, you know, it's pretty generic. We all go through this. So yes. We'll see what happens.
Right. How can the average reader and cynic like myself identify with the Songs of Roland? It's not like any book ever.
Thank you. To identify, well, I think a cynic...
How will we use it?
Okay, well,
That's
a good question. A cynic, I think, would identify with it because Roland's cynical. He's looking at this and saying, you know, we got some big fundamental problems here, and how are we going to change it? And I'm just one person. And I didn't do too good in the previous life, you know. I made an attempt, and I'm paying, basically, I had to come back to atone for defending my wife's honor. I mean, well, you can't get more cynical than that. So, so how overpowering is this, you know, we like to say, a higher power is, and how far do we go to rise above the profane? That's I think, a term we use.
And the book makes a big point. It takes a lot of strength to do the right thing.
Yes.
More strength than anyone ever really knows.
Oh, yeah. And, you know, when I was researching the book, it was interesting because a few people made some comments about the temptation scene. And they thought it was inappropriate. And I said, no, I mean, that's life as it really is. And what people...
You're always given choices every day.
Yes, yes. And what a lot of people, they probably wouldn't read this, but when they look in terms of, if you were looking at, you know, specifically Catholicism, when they talk about saints being tempted, and basically what they would do to a person who was very pious is let him sleep with a woman, see how he could survive without being tempted.
Yes, well,
yeah, it's a pretty tough test.
The Songs of Roland, how do we buy it?
Oh, you could get it. It's available at Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and it's also available on Kindle and ebook.
Okay, well, I have read it, and I endorse this book.
Thank you.
Bailey, right, John Bailey, Jim Benerofe, for People to be Heard. Good night.